The research vessel Stellar Horizon drifted silently through the Kuiper Belt, its sensors probing the icy bodies that marked the edge of human space. Commander Natasha Patel stood at the observation deck, her weathered face reflected in the reinforced glass as she watched the distant stars. 20 years of deep space exploration had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now, something felt off. "Commander," Lieutenant James Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom. "We're picking up some unusual energy signatures about 30,000 kilometers off our starboard bow." "Define unusual, Lieutenant," Natasha replied, already moving toward the bridge. "It's like nothing in our database, ma'am. The energy pattern suggests a propulsion system, but it's operating on principles we've never seen before." The bridge crew sat at their stations, faces illuminated by the soft blue glow of their displays. Dr. Kiyoshi Tanaka, the ship's lead xenophysicist, was hunched over his console, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "Whatever it is, it's massive," Kiyoshi reported. "At least 3 times our size, and the energy output, it's incredible. We could power Earth's entire grid for a year with what they're putting out in a day." "First contact protocol," Rodriguez suggested, his hand hovering over the communications panel. Natasha nodded. "Begin broadcast of the standard greeting package. All frequencies, all known encoding methods. And get me dash." The ship suddenly lurched, throwing several crew members from their seats. Warning klaxons blared as red emergency lights bathed the bridge in an ominous glow. Multiple ships decloaking. Security Chief Diana Walsh shouted. 7, no, 9 vessels. They're surrounding us." The alien ships resembled massive arthropods, their metallic hulls sectioned like insect carapaces, with what appeared to be energy weapons mounted on articulated appendages. Before the crew could react, a strange purple beam struck the stellar horizon, and every electronic system aboard began to fail. "EMP?" Natasha demanded, steadying herself against her command chair. "Negative," Kiyoshi responded, frantically working his now flickering console. "It's some kind of targeted energy weapon. It's not destroying our systems, it's redirecting them. We're losing control." Diana's face went pale as she studied her tactical display. "They're deploying boarding craft. Multiple contact points along the hull." Natasha's mind raced. Their ship was primarily a research vessel, with minimal defensive capabilities. But that didn't mean they were helpless. "Implementation of Security Protocol Omega-7, she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Purge all databases. Activate the emergency beacon. And arm all personnel." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, despite never having expected to use these protocols outside of drills. As the ship's computer cores began their emergency data wipe, crew members retrieved weapons from secure lockers and took up defensive positions. "Listen carefully," Natasha addressed her crew through the ship-wide comm, "whatever happens next, remember your training. Remember that you represent not just this ship, but all of humanity. And most importantly, remember that we've prepared for this. These aliens may think they've found an easy target, but they're about to learn otherwise." The first explosion rocked the ship as the boarding craft breached the outer hull. Through the breach points came creatures that looked like a nightmare fusion of insect and reptile, their chitinous armor gleaming under the emergency lights. They carried advanced weapons and moved with military precision. But the crew of the Stellar Horizon was ready. Diana had drilled them relentlessly in close-quarters combat, and now those drills paid off. The security teams used the ship's narrow corridors to their advantage, setting up crossfires and fallback positions that forced the aliens to pay dearly for every meter they advanced. Dr. Kiyoshi, rather than retreating with the other scientists, worked frantically at his station. "Commander, I'm analyzing their communications. There's a pattern. I think I can dash." His console exploded in a shower of sparks as a blast door nearby burst inward. 3 alien warriors charged through, only to be met by precise fire from Diana's security team. One alien fell, its armor proving insufficient against the concentrated fire. But the others pressed forward, firing weapons that filled the air with crackling energy bolts. "Fall back to secondary positions," Natasha ordered, drawing her own sidearm. She knew they couldn't hold forever, but they could make these invaders remember this day. As she organized the retreat, she noticed something crucial: the aliens weren't trying to kill them. Their weapons were set to stun, their tactics focused on capture rather than elimination. They were slavers, she realized with growing horror. And they'd just made their first attempt to enslave humanity. The battle raged through the ship's corridors for hours, but eventually, superior numbers and technology began to tell. One by one, sections of the ship fell to the invaders. But with each capture, the aliens learned a harsh lesson about human resilience. Every crew member fought until they were physically incapacitated, and even then, many managed to activate suicide charges in critical systems, denying the invaders access to human technology and data. As Natasha was finally cornered on the bridge, surrounded by the chittering aliens, she allowed herself a grim smile. The emergency beacon had gotten through. Earth knew they were here. And if these aliens thought humans would make docile slaves, they were about to learn a very painful lesson about human nature. "You have no idea what you've just started," she told the alien commander as energy bonds were placed around her wrists. The alien's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement, clearly not understanding her words but recognizing the defiance in her tone. As she was led away with her surviving crew, Natasha began to plan. These aliens had ships, technology, and numbers on their side. But they had just made the mistake of capturing a crew of humans who were not only highly trained scientists and engineers but also possessed something the aliens couldn't comprehend: an absolute refusal to accept captivity. The real battle was just beginning. The holding cell aboard the alien vessel thrummed with a low, constant vibration. Commander Natasha Patel sat cross-legged on the metallic floor, her eyes closed but her mind racing. Around her, 23 survivors of her crew waited silently, following her example of calculated patience. They'd been imprisoned for what felt like 3 Earth days, though it was hard to be certain without their chronometers. "Status report," she whispered, barely moving her lips. The aliens had surveillance systems, but Lieutenant Rodriguez had already identified their blind spots. "Engineering team is ready," Kiyoshi murmured from his position near the cell's force field. "We've mapped most of their power distribution network through the conduits in the walls. Their technology is advanced, but their basic physics are the same as ours." "Medical assessment?" Natasha directed her question to Dr. Fatima Hassan, the ship's chief medical officer. "Their atmosphere is surprisingly compatible with ours," Fatima replied softly. "Gravity slightly higher than Earth normal. The food they're providing is basic protein and carbohydrates, nothing toxic. They want us healthy." Diana Walsh shifted slightly, her security training evident in how she maintained awareness of the guard patterns. "They're rotating shifts every 6 hours. 3 main guard posts between us and what appears to be their armory. I've counted 47 different guards so far, suggesting a total crew complement of around 200. Natasha nodded imperceptibly. Over the past days, her crew had done what humans did best: they observed, analyzed, and adapted. While their captors saw only docile prisoners, the humans were systematically deconstructing every aspect of their containment. The cell's force field flickered briefly as 2 alien guards approached with food dispensers. These weren't the warrior caste they'd fought during the boarding, these were smaller, more specialized workers. As they began distributing nutrient packages, Kiyoshi caught Natasha's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Each time the aliens fed them, Kiyoshi had been studying the force field's power fluctuations. Each time, he'd noticed the same pattern: a momentary surge in the surrounding conduits as the field adapted to allow the food through. It was an infinitesimal weakness, but it was all they needed. "We're ready for Phase 1, Rodriguez whispered as the guards departed. During his time as communications officer, he developed an uncanny ability to parse patterns in alien languages. "I've decoded enough of their internal comm chatter to know they're taking us to something called the processing center within the next cycle." Natasha's jaw tightened. She'd seen enough slave narratives in human history to know what processing likely meant. They had to move before that happened. "Begin preparations," she ordered. "Diana, distribute the tools." Over the past days, the crew had been systematically dismantling their nutrient packages, using the metallic components to fashion crude but effective tools. Diana had even managed to create several shivs from the high-density plastic of the containers. The aliens, believing humans to be primitive newcomers to space, hadn't recognized the danger in giving engineers access to even basic materials. Kiyoshi moved to the back of the cell, where he'd been secretly accessing the power conduit through a panel they'd loosened. The aliens had built their ship with an impressive degree of automation, but that same automation made their systems predictable. Every power surge, every system cycle followed a pattern. "The next major power cycle will hit in approximately 40 minutes, he reported. "That's our window." Natasha gathered her crew close, speaking in whispers. "Remember your assignments. Engineering team, you're with Kiyoshi, get to environmental control as soon as we're out. Medical team with Fatima, find us weapons that work with human biology. Security teams, you're our front line, create chaos, keep them confused." She looked at each of their faces, seeing not fear but determination. "These aliens think they understand humans because they've studied our technology, our biology. But they don't understand what makes us different from every other species they've enslaved. We don't just resist, we adapt, we improvise, and we overcome." The next 40 minutes were spent in final preparations. Tools were distributed, plans were rehearsed in whispers, and every crew member prepared themselves mentally for what was to come. They'd only get one chance at this. When the power cycle hit, Kiyoshi was ready. He'd modified their crude tools into conductors, using them to create a feedback loop in the force field's power distribution. As the surge rolled through the system, he triggered his improvised device. The force field didn't just fail, it cascaded, creating a power fluctuation that rippled through the entire detention block. Emergency lights flashed as backup systems tried to compensate. "Move!" Natasha ordered, and her crew exploded into action. Diana's security team took point, using their makeshift weapons with lethal efficiency against the surprised guards. Rodriguez led another team to the communication hub he'd identified through the power conduits, while Kiyoshi's engineers headed for environmental control. The aliens responded with predictable tactics, trying to contain what they saw as a simple prisoner uprising. But this was no mere riot, it was a carefully orchestrated tactical operation by trained professionals who had spent days preparing. Fatima's team found the armory exactly where Diana's observations had suggested it would be. The alien weapons were designed for their physiology, but human hands could adapt. Within minutes, they were armed with more than improvised shivs. The ship's corridors became a battlefield, but not the kind the aliens were prepared for. Humans might be physically weaker than their captors, but they fought with a creativity and adaptability that left the aliens reeling. Kiyoshi's team used their understanding of the power systems to create chaos, shutting down sections of the ship at crucial moments. Rodriguez's group managed to hack into the internal communication systems, feeding false orders that sent alien security teams rushing to phantom disturbances. By the time the alien captain realized the full scope of what was happening, it was too late. The humans had control of key systems, armed themselves, and established defensive positions throughout critical sections of the ship. Natasha stood in the ship's environmental control center, surrounded by her crew and their newly acquired alien weapons. The first phase of their plan had succeeded beyond their expectations, but she knew this was just the beginning. "Send the message to all sections," she ordered Rodriguez. "In their language." Rodriguez keyed in the communication, broadcasting it shipwide, "We are not your slaves. We are not your property. We are human beings, and we are taking this ship. Surrender, or we'll show you exactly how creative we can be with your own technology." The response they received would determine their next move, but one thing was certain: the aliens were about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their weapons, but their absolute refusal to be subjugated. The alien captain's response came not in words but in action. Emergency bulkheads slammed down throughout the ship as life support began to shut down in sections controlled by the humans. But Natasha had anticipated this move. It was exactly what she would have done in the captain's position. "Kiyoshi, now," she ordered through their captured comm system. The xenophysicist's fingers flew across the alien control panel he'd reprogrammed. "Executing Protocol Omega." They thought they could suffocate us, but they forgot who designed their environmental failsafes. During their captivity, Kiyoshi had noticed something crucial about the alien life support systems. They were designed with multiple redundancies, each triggered by specific emergency conditions. By manipulating these conditions, his team had created a cascade effect that forced all systems to revert to their safest settings. The ship's lighting flickered as emergency protocols engaged. Bulkheads rose automatically as the system detected what it believed to be critical failures. Throughout the vessel, confused alien crews found themselves responding to multiple automated emergency signals. "Diana, begin Phase 3, Natasha commanded. Security teams that had been waiting in strategic positions began their coordinated assault. The aliens, already disoriented by the environmental system's chaos, found themselves under attack from multiple directions. Diana had studied their tactical responses during the initial uprising and noted their rigid adherence to standard protocols, a weakness she now exploited mercilessly. "Commander," Rodriguez called from his position at the communications array. "I'm picking up distress signals. They're calling for reinforcements." "Good," Natasha replied, surprising her crew. "Let them call. Every ship they bring is another ship we can take." The battle for control of the vessel raged through its corridors, but this time the humans held the tactical advantage. Dr. Fatima's medical team had analyzed the alien biology during their captivity, identifying vulnerable points in their physiology. This knowledge, combined with Diana's combat expertise, made the human counterattacks devastatingly effective. "Engineering team reports success," Kiyoshi announced. "We have control of the main drive systems. The aliens are locked out of all critical functions." The ship's internal security feeds showed the alien crew retreating to their last defensive positions. Their captain, a massive specimen of their species, stood on the bridge, mandibles clicking in what the humans had learned to recognize as agitation. Natasha activated the ship-wide comm system. "This is Commander Patel to all alien crew members. Your ship is now under human control. Your weapons are ineffective, your systems are compromised, and your tactical position is untenable. I offer you one chance to surrender." The alien captain's response came in their own language, translated by Rodriguez's increasingly sophisticated understanding of their communications: "Impossible. You are primitives. You cannot comprehend our technology." "That's where you made your mistake," Natasha replied. "You assumed that because we hadn't developed certain technologies, we couldn't understand them. You forgot that humans have spent their entire history adapting and repurposing others' tools." To emphasize her point, she nodded to Kiyoshi, who initiated a program they'd created using the ship's own automation systems. Throughout the vessel, defensive turrets emerged from the walls, turrets that now targeted the alien crew instead of the human prisoners. "Your own security systems now answer to us," Natasha continued. "Your weapons are coded to human biosignatures. Even your environmental controls will only accept human authorization. You called us primitives, but we've mastered your technology in days." The alien captain's reply was cut short as Diana's teams breached the bridge. The fight was brief but decisive. Years of dealing with pirates and hostile environments had made Earth's space forces experts in close-quarter combat, and Diana had trained her security teams to perfection. Within hours, the remaining alien crew had surrendered. As they were secured in their own holding cells, Natasha stood on the bridge of their captured vessel, watching her crew efficiently master alien control systems. "Status report," she ordered. "Ship systems are fully under our control," Kiyoshi reported. "We're already beginning to improve several of their efficiency algorithms. Remarkably inefficient for such advanced technology. Medical Bay is treating our wounded," Fatima added. "No fatalities on our side. The aliens are also receiving treatment, they're starting to realize we're not the barbarians they assumed we were. Long-range communications are picking up similar situations on other vessels," Rodriguez interjected. "It seems we weren't the only humans they captured. 3 other ships in this sector are reporting prisoner uprisings." Natasha smiled grimly. Of course there were other captured humans fighting back. It was what they did, what they had always done throughout their history. Give humans time to analyze a situation, tools to work with, and a cause to fight for, and they would always find a way to prevail. "Send encrypted messages to the other human-controlled ships," she ordered. "It's time to coordinate our efforts. These slavers thought they could add humanity to their collection of subjugated species. Instead, they've given us the means to free every species they've enslaved." As her crew began establishing contact with other liberated vessels, Natasha looked at the alien star charts they'd captured. Hundreds of worlds marked as harvested or pending acquisition. Thousands of species waiting for liberation. The aliens had wanted slaves. Instead, they'd created an army of liberators. And humanity was just getting started. For weeks after the initial uprising, the captured slaver vessel, now renamed Liberation, hung in orbit around a massive gas giant. Its hull, once bearing the insignia of the slave empire, now displayed markings in multiple alien languages, freedom and hope. Commander Natasha stood in what had once been the slave-holding area, now converted into a war room. Around her gathered not just her human crew, but representatives from 6 different alien species they'd freed from other captured vessels. "The Drachnid ship's approach," announced the Vex delegate, their crystalline form shimming under the lights. The Vex had been slaves for generations, their natural ability to process complex mathematical equations exploited by the slavers. "Right on schedule," Natasha nodded. "Status of our modifications, Kiyoshi?" The scientist looked up from his workstation, where he'd been collaborating with a pair of Serpentine Scythian engineers. "The hybrid weapons systems are performing beyond expectations. Combining Scythian plasma technology with human targeting algorithms has increased efficiency by 300%. This was humanity's greatest strength," Natasha reflected, "not just their ability to adapt technology, but to help others do the same." In the weeks since their escape, they discovered that many enslaved species had developed incredible technological innovations in secret, but lacked the coordination or confidence to use them effectively. "Commander," Rodriguez called out, his station now featuring a unique interface he'd developed with help from the telepathic meridians. "The Drachnid fleet is hailing us. They're confused." "Put them through," Natasha ordered, straightening her uniform. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the insectoid face of a Drachnid captain. Their mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation that Diana's security teams had learned to recognize. "This is impossible," the Drachnid captain chittered. "Our scans show slave species operating freely. This violates all protocols." "Your protocols no longer apply," Natasha replied calmly. "We're offering you the same choice we've given every slaver ship we've encountered. Surrender and join us, or face the consequences." The Drachnid's compound eyes flickered. "You are merely slaves. You cannot dash." Their transmission cut off as the Liberation's new weapon systems activated. Precision strikes disabled the Drachnid ship's primary weapons and engines, while leaving life support intact. It was a technique perfected by combining human tactical doctrine with Vex calculations and Scythian technology. All ships disabled, Diana reported from her tactical station, now staffed by a mixed crew of humans and freed aliens. No casualties. Their crews are intact but contained. Begin boarding operations, Natasha ordered. Dr. Hassan, your teams are cleared to proceed. Fatima nodded, leading her mixed medical teams to the shuttle bays. They'd learned that showing immediate medical care to captured slaver crews helped break down their prejudices faster. It was harder to maintain beliefs of superiority when being healed by those you once considered inferior. The liberation of the Drachnid ships took less than 6 hours, a new record. Each freed ship added to their growing fleet, and each freed species brought new innovations and abilities to their cause. Later, in the fleet's new command center, Natasha met with her expanded council. The original human crew now worked seamlessly alongside their alien allies, each contributing their unique strengths to their shared mission. The Drachnid ships have given us access to their navigation database, Rodriguez reported, working with a Meridian to process the vast amount of data. We've identified 37 major slave processing centers in this sector alone. The slavers still don't understand what they're facing, Diana added. They keep treating these as isolated incidents. They can't comprehend a unified resistance. Kiyoshi pulled up a holographic display of their fleet's latest modifications. The Vex have helped us optimize our FTL drives. We can now reach any target in the sector within days instead of weeks. And the Scythians' energy management systems have solved our power consumption issues. Natasha studied the tactical display, showing their growing fleet of liberated ships. What had started as a single act of resistance had grown into something unprecedented, a united force of former slaves, each bringing their own unique abilities and technologies to the fight. The slavers built their empire on the assumption that different species couldn't work together effectively, she addressed the council. They deliberately kept their slaves isolated, playing on prejudices and fears. But they never counted on humanity's greatest skill, our ability to unite people toward a common cause. A Vex representative chimed in, their crystalline form pulsing with energy. Before the humans came, we could not imagine freedom. Now we cannot imagine accepting slavery again. The next phase begins tomorrow, Natasha announced. We've built our force, perfected our techniques. Now we take the fight directly to the slave empire's core worlds. As the council dispersed to prepare for their largest operation yet, Natasha received a priority communication from Earth. The message was brief but significant: more human ships were coming. Earth had mobilized its fleets, not just to fight, but to help coordinate the growing rebellion. The slave empire had made a catastrophic mistake. They had assumed that capturing humans would give them just another species of slaves. Instead, they had provided humanity with the means to unite and liberate every species they had ever enslaved. And the revolution was just beginning. The massive fleet hung in formation at the edge of the slave empire's home system, over 300 ships of various designs and origins, all unified under the banner of liberation. At its heart, the liberation still led the way, though it had been extensively modified with technologies from a dozen different species. Commander Natasha Patel stood on her bridge, now a fusion of human intuition and alien efficiency. The former research vessel crew had grown into something unprecedented, leaders of the largest multi-species rebellion in known space. Status report, she commanded, her voice carrying the weight of countless battles. Earth's battle group has arrived, Rodriguez announced from his advanced communications array. Admiral Chen's fleet is taking position on our flanks. They're bringing the new hybrid ships. The arrival of Earth's forces had transformed their rebellion into a full-scale revolution. Human shipyards had been working overtime, combining technologies from all their allied species into devastatingly effective warships. The Vex consensus has completed their calculations, Kiyoshi reported, working alongside his alien counterparts. They've identified every weakness in the Empire's defense grid. The Scythians have already begun targeting their power distribution nodes. Diana's tactical display showed the Empire's capital system in perfect detail, a massive network of orbital platforms, defense stations, and patrol fleets. It would have been impenetrable to any single species. But they weren't a single species anymore. "The slavers are broadcasting," Rodriguez called out. They're offering terms." Natasha allowed herself a grim smile. "Put them through." The Imperial Archon appeared on their main screen, its massive form practically vibrating with barely contained rage. "This rebellion ends now," it declared through Rodriguez's translation matrix. "Return to your designated functions, and your species may be permitted to survive." "I don't think you understand the situation," Natasha replied calmly. "We're not here to negotiate. We're here to end your empire." She nodded to Kiyoshi, who activated their ship-wide broadcasting system. Across every frequency, in every language used in known space, their message began to play. It was simple but powerful, recordings from freed slaves, stories of resistance, proof that freedom was possible. "You built your empire on the belief that different species couldn't work together," Natasha continued. "That fear and isolation were stronger than unity and hope. But humans have a long history of proving oppressors wrong." As if on cue, their fleet began to move. It was a battle plan that combined human tactical doctrine, Vex mathematical precision, Scythian energy weapons, Meridian psychic coordination, and technologies from dozens of other species. Each former slave race contributed their strengths, creating something greater than any single species could achieve. The Empire's defenses were formidable, but they were designed to fight conventional enemies. They weren't prepared for ships that combined multiple species technologies. They couldn't adapt to tactics that changed with every engagement, drawing on countless cultures' military traditions. "Multiple ships are powering down," Diana reported as the battle unfolded. "Their slave crews are revolting. Our broadcast is working." Across the system, as the truth of possible freedom spread, slave crews began turning on their masters. The Empire's supposedly loyal servants revealed themselves to be rebels waiting for their moment. The carefully maintained hierarchy began to crumble. The imperial palace itself fell not to external attack, but to its own domestic staff, beings who had been considered too broken to resist. They proved just how wrong their masters had been. Hours later, Natasha stood in the Imperial Archon's former throne room, surrounded by representatives from dozens of freed species. The final surrender had been signed not in submission, but in transformation. The Empire's vast resources would now be used to rebuild free worlds. "What happens now?" asked a young Drachnid, one of many former slavers who had chosen to join their cause. "Now comes the hard part," Natasha replied. "Building something new. Something better." She looked around at the gathered beings, former slaves and slavers, predator species and prey, all standing together. The Empire thought diversity was a weakness. They never understood that our differences make us stronger. Earth's ships now patrolled alongside vessels commanded by former slaves. Research teams composed of multiple species worked to combine their knowledge, creating technologies none of them could have developed alone. Trade routes were established, cultural exchanges began, and a new era of cooperation emerged. The slavers had sought to build an empire of chains. Instead, they had provided the catalyst for something unprecedented, a true union of species, bound not by force but by choice. And at its heart were the humans, not as conquerors or saviors, but as equals who had shown that resistance was possible. As Natasha prepared to return to her ship, she received word that the last slave processing center had been liberated. The message came in dozens of languages, but its meaning was the same in all of them: we are free. The empire of slavery had fallen not to a superior force, but to a superior idea, that different species could work together, that unity was stronger than dominance, and that the desire for freedom could never truly be crushed. The stars themselves seemed brighter now, filled not with the darkness of oppression but with the light of possibility. Humanity had come to the stars seeking knowledge and found instead their greatest purpose, not to rule, not to conquer, but to unite. And in the end, that had made all the difference. The end.